Alright.
Autopilot engaged.
Off to space we go again.
Hyperspace boosters online. Engaging cryosleep.
Cryosleep?
Oops.
No. There's no way I'm gonna...
Okay then.
Okay, so welcome to that EA conference where they gassed everyone at the end.
Does that mean they also punched people who resisted that? I can't believe EA will do that.
I mean, would you be surprised?
When their CEO, at least back then, literally looked like the devil. Anyway, this serves to have a tease of one major thing of this future saga. Clank in contact with this species, the Zone. Who they are, what they mean, that's what we need to find out.
Clank!
Oh god!
Are you okay? You got knocked out there for a minute.
I am fine. Where are we?
Beats me. Ship must have run out of fuel while on...
Yeah, another thing for this game, it's gonna be a bit before Ratchet actually manages to acquire a proper new ship to move. So these first couple of levels serves to just move from place to place.
I'll admit, it does seem a bit weird that, okay, we took the ship, but then we apparently flew well out instead of just going to a different point of the planet.
It's an excuse to have a specific one, first level where you're stranded in, instead of actually having, to choose where to go, basically.
I'll try and be a bit fair, but, obviously by the time of the 7th gen in gaming, this is when we were expecting plots to have some semblance in at least most... okay, to be fair, Ratchet and Clank was always a game series that had more emphasis on story than your typical platformer at the time, so it is a bit weird to have a level just happen just because that isn't one of the PSP games. I should emphasize, a lot of weird stuff happened in the PSP games, but that was a different team. This is the team we are familiar with.
Well, like I said, TJ Fixman did not really particularly add any credited work before this, and he mostly specialized in with these games. He stuck around until the reimagining of the first game. He did not write the movie, he was supposed to, but unfortunately, because the director of that movie apparently went in, in confrontation with him, I don't know exactly the detail what happened, but I'll try to look it up before we actually do the movie. TJ Fixman just decided to quit and told them, well, you're on your own, sucks to be you. And as a result, not only the movie is a complete mess in terms of writing, and handled from the person who did TMNT 2007, so you can imagine what kind of weird continuities now that is to begin with. But as a result, Rift Apart had to be wrote by someone else, and that too had its own troubled development cycle in terms also of writing. But again, when we eventually get there, basically. The point is that for most of these games on the PS3, the writer would be consistently TJ Fixman, but as a result, at least going with what his resume tells, he did not seem to have a particularly lot of experience before actually jumping in, so expect still not a complete perfect work.
Basically, the PS3 games are similar to the PSP games in the sense that, while I'm a bit more familiar with the PS3, anything console-wise with Ratchet and Clank, but I'm still not as super familiar with it as I am the original trilogy. That being said, I do recall that while for the most part the PS3 to PS4 era is for the most part beloved, you will definitely get some grumblings about certain plot elements across the board here and there, which part of me does lead me to wonder, did TJ Fixman do his research beforehand, or did he just go in with the broad sense of how the series goes?
Probably beforehand, but only to an extent, because you can tell that as the games progressed, more and more stuff got referenced, from the past. Keep in mind, it's worth noting that it's also a case of doing stuff as we go on, because A Crack in Time apparently originally was supposed to be the conclusion of the franchise. Mind you, when we get to the end of A Crack in Time, I will have to question that, because it still ends in a relatively open way that doesn't feel as conclusive as it probably thinks it is. But thanks to the fact that it was hugely successful, both critically and monetarily, Sony told Insomniac, no, you have to keep going. And that's how we got the comic series, All for One, Full Frontal Assault / Q-Force, and ultimately Nexus, which all then led to all the reimagining and Rift Apart eventually.
What does it say that the reimagining was apparently so bad that it took years for a new Ratchet and Clank game to come afterwards?
Well, that was because, again, also TJ Fixman had the part of the writing team, the writing department, and for lack of a better term, everything that was happening at the same time had Insomniac, having to rethink a bit about its position, because I remember Resistance was done with that. They wanted to make a fourth game, but Sony told them no, because we already have Band Studios doing Days Gone and Naughty Dog doing The Last of Us Part 2, so we might have too many games with similar premises or post-apocalyptic, zombie-like structure, even though if you should know by now that Resistance is a bit of a different beast, but that's what he said.
I was about to say.
So instead, Insomniac was contracted to do a superhero game, and as Pedro told us, they decided to choose Spider-Man properly on their own.
Good for them on that, but I do have to say, Sony sometimes had a very, very, very weird glance on the industry, so their mentality was, we have too many zombie games, sure, maybe, but like you said, Resistance blatantly was not a zombie game. It's an alien invasion plot here and there, and I think it would have been a better argument to say Resistance met its narrative conclusion at that point, although one could argue just make games that take place in between, but I digress.
Yeah, basically, spin-offs around the war, like I suggested.
I do kind of find...
Keep in mind, 3 still had, 1 or 2 notes potentially open by the humans still not understanding who were the true chimeras, for example. Again, stuff that can be potentially milked about. The potential was there, technically.
I do find it a bit ironic, though, because Insomniac at first kind of were, mandated to do Resistance, so I guess they must have legit found a love for that franchise if by the time of 3 they were asking to do a 4th game.
We have seen also the interviews in the making-of sections drove up. According to Ted Price himself, they seem to actually genuinely still like what they did at the end of the day. Even bad, narrative decisions like killing Hale at the end of the 2nd game, at least, in my opinion. Anyway, this particular creature function is the mini-boss, which gives us this thing, a Leviathan Soul, basically, its essence. This game introduces something, a mechanic similar to the ones of the 2nd and 3rd game about collecting resources. In this case, specifically dealing with creatures on specific planets and then giving their loot to someone who actually will give us a huge amount of bolts for that. It's a different kind of way of farming.
It gives it something of an open world sense, not entirely, but
sorta. Which leads also to this new character, which we're gonna talk in a bit, the smuggler. He doesn't even have a name.
But that's right, kids. If you defeat certain monsters, you can harvest their souls and use them to fund the economy.
To be fair, that is in line with the, corporate satire of a franchise, so I appreciate that. That being said, you don't have any more Gadgetron vendors for the time being. Instead, your services are provided by the Grummels, a species of wandering merchants that actually are specialized in, selling you and upgrading your stuff. Mind you, this is how I refer to them because TJ Fixman decides to call them in a different way, which you will hear along the game. Something that I really did not even understood, and it has only aged worse since. But this also inserts a new type of gimmick, upgrading your weapons using Raritanium. If you play Pokemon Master ZX, you will recognize instantly this beehive structure of an upgrade system, where you spend your resources, Raritanium in this case, in order to expand particular gimmicks of a weapon, like more damage, a specific perk, or ammo capacity. Again, the gist of it is still basically the same. Collect as much Raritanium and not just bolts, so you can actually ulteriorly upgrade your weapon, not just with the level.
all these new concepts and shops does lead me to wonder how much of the, what's all that's different in here. How much of that do you think is dictated by the writer? Again, the writer who constructs the world here and there. Like, I mean, not just the narrative, but also the fact that we have different shops instead of some of the usual merchant characters, which for the most part, even in the PSP games, were there in some way, shape, or form.
Well, okay, that can potentially... I get the idea it might be a case of conjunct effort, because, maybe it's a case where TJ Fixman writes the very basics. Hold on, I'll mention a second. I don't remember which is the smuggler, but we're basically Australian stereotypes, Crocodile Dundee and all.
Blame the parrot! Always blame the parrot! Is everything all right, sir? Imperial spies! Hide their bodies!
Oh.
Well,
Imperial spies? Dude, we're not in Star Wars.
Humble smugglers, unfairly hunted and persecuted wherever we go.
Oh, it's Jess Arnell playing him.
Fair enough.
Gelatonium plant. They must be looking for someone.
Oh, so his eye patch is
kinda
even
stranded ourselves.
useless.
Our ship crashed back
He
there.
does it to look cool to you.
I mean, I've seen other people do that. I'll need to ask Shiroi how much, of faking your disability is.
Procure a vessel for you. Here, you'll need this gelator.
There you go.
That was easy.
Gives us for free the specific gadget, the Gelanator. You'll see how it is properly used. Anyway, I think it's again a conjunct effort. I think it was a case of the writer, in this case DJ Pixman, first write the basics of what the plot actually, will do. Then the storyboard artists produce a set of sketches on what the planets will actually look like based on those information or the characters. Then there's a case of the actual game development having to use the level design and say, let's plan this thing in there. So it might be a case of where you're correct, Jova, but also just a conjunct effort. Just because there is one writer, or at least one credited, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything came from TJ Pixman. Anyway, just to mention, for some bizarre reason, instead of actually having just weapons and gadgets, you have a set of consumables, like in this case, a new entry, the Groovytron. It's literally a disco ball and makes literally everyone in the room, NPCs and enemies, start dancing uncontrollably.
I guess that can come in handy for later. But no, what I was wondering regarding the writer is, again, there are some cases we've seen in movies where sometimes a movie's plot fails not because of the director, but because of the writer, and in some senses even with games here and there, which does lead me to wonder sometimes, if a writer can essentially call the shots. Not entirely, but, basically a writer can dictate a plot and the world in some cases. I'm not saying that it's a given. You're probably right that it was more of a team effort, but it really does make me wonder if there are cases where an entire world can change just because a writer has a certain whim. And shoot, it goes without saying, that's more or less how it goes in comic books, since the writing is kind of everything. I mean, yes, there's the artistry, but, good artistry does get you good fight scenes, but the writing is what dictates the lore, arguably, which a lot of people do tend to consider more important in the long run.
Anyway, that's how the Gelatonium, web gadget actually works. So you refill it kind of like the Hydro Splicer from the first game, and then you use it to create, gelatinous cubes that you can use to bounce around. Mind
Simple enough.
As you can see, they're not stay there eternally, so you need to actually be quick on your feet nonetheless.
I don't know if I've asked you this before, but which Ratchet and Clank game has your overall favorite selection of weapons?
I have to go with probably a Crack in Time. I think I did mention, but again, just to be safe, yeah, I think a Crack in Time. Mind you, there isn't a game where I argue the weapon, overall weapon arsenal was a disappointment. So I do appreciate it nonetheless in what they did with the variety and, the creativity put on display. So there is technically that, but yeah, some games have it better than others, I will say that. I want to say
like I said it before.
Still, even in recent times, they still managed to come up with something new and interesting, like the Pixelator, a weapon that they premiered in the reimagining, but it's also present in Rift Apart, where it's basically literally turns the polygons of a model into actual pixels, and the more you use it, the more pixelated it is, until it becomes a Doom-esque sprite. I don't know how they managed to code that, but it's actually pretty cool to look at. You'll be able to see eventually.
Yeah, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Whatever ups and downs the Ratchet and Clank series has had, one could argue that even the bad games are arguably still good by regular game standards. It's just about what's the best or the worst.
The overall quality of a franchise still remains, with a bar that is solidly high.
Restored. Plant operating at 50% efficiency. We must remind you that you are currently
The only thing that the only one that I need to have, enough of information to actually see what the deal is about. They are still All for One and Full Frontal Assault / Q-Force. Mostly because, again, those change the gameplay, because All for One is more about Gauntlet.
Multiplayer?
Gauntlet-inspired fixed camera multiplayer game. Meaning that, it's, despite maintaining the similar characteristics to the classic games, it still looks different enough. And Full Frontal Assault / Q4, from what I heard, focuses a lot on tower defense, so I'll have to see actually how that plays out.
Tower defense. I always have a love-hate relationship with those types of games. Like, obviously, they can work, and for people who are into them, that's good, but I feel like tower defense games are kind of like escort simulators. Are basically like, escort quests if they were entire games, essentially. So, obviously, you gotta know your craft to handle them well. As for the music in this game, I'm fine with it.
It's still David Berger, if I recall correctly. And you can tell the transitioning towards the more whimsical nature to complement. Some pieces are better than others. Let me put it this way, Jove. You know how Secret Agent Clank had a lot of pieces that were clearly inspired by Bond movies? Well, there are at least a couple of those that clearly are instead inspired by Pirates of the Caribbean. You'll be able to hear them.
Okay, I love that soundtrack, though I do find it a bit weird going for Ratchet and Clank, but maybe it can work.
To be fair, Joe, again, it's we kinda did establish since the early games that space pirates are a thing in this.
Oh yes. I'm just wondering if it'll fit whatever levels they do for Ratchet and Clank. I do like that they at least kept the running trend of Ratchet kind of having a lot of his power-ups at the start.
Yes,
like the
not all of
boots.
them, but some of the basic stuff like the grinding boots, the magnet boots, or even other basics gadgets are still there, thankfully.
Obviously, it's because it's a different writer, but do you ever wonder if maybe Ratchet just decides, I feel like going fully armored, or, I just don't feel like wearing a shirt.
I don't know.
Between all the times he's been off and on with his wardrobe. This current style, which is pretty much what he'll be sticking with for the rest of the series, if I recall correctly, feels like it's a compromise where it's an orange suit, orange like his fur, but he's wearing proper gear now like he would in 2 and 3.
You can still get different costumes, as you go on, so you can have that if you want, but again, for the most part, Ratchet, yes, will maintain that look instead of actually having the too edgy for you armor all the time. And yeah, in order to make sure that you don't, abuse the game mechanics, usually sections that make you use the Gelatonium weapon, make sure to have you give it away before you leave, meaning that it's you don't just get into funny business on the outside.
You know, it's funny, 30 frames per second. Like,
Any citizen who sees the renegade
Oh yeah, no,
As
I
a
forgot.
kid-
Never mind, there is armor. Sorry, go on.
you know, as a kid, I never realized what 60 frames per second really did until we were stuck with a generation of 30 FPS. Then we got to the point where Sonic Lost World actually emphasized the fact that it was bringing back 60 frames per second. Like, it's interesting. Like, a lot of people reveled at the return of 60 frames per second, but a lot of us had forgotten what 60 frames per second was like because as kids, well, games just felt more or less natural to them.
It
which
was
I guess
a combination
worked.
of elements, Jova, where the PS3, Xbox 360 generation, between the difficult hardware to work with and the more emphasis on story-heavy games that involves the quote-unquote cinematic approach, meant that developers could use that kind of excuse to say, no, don't you see, guys, it's not a performance problem, it's a feature,
And they managed to do it so well that they more or less normalized 30 FPS.
Well, to be
for a
fair,
whole
thankfully, with the
generation.
start of the PS4, Xbox One era, and also with the rise, in awareness of the PC market, we seem to actually have finally stepped out of that. And every time a game starts with 30 FPS, it's usually not frowned upon, but questioned upon if it has a good reasons to do it.
Yeah, which ironically makes 30 FPS kind of dated in its own regard now.
Pretty much. Again, I cannot really speak completely for myself because as certified European, we did had the whole problem with German TVs back in the PS2 era, meaning that we peaked at 50 instead of 60, so a lot of games did have that kind of problem. But I do distinctly remember, for example, the PS2 Devil May Cry game running very smoothly. And to be fair, the HD collections for those kept that, so it wasn't a case of a game losing frame rate with the passage of time. But I do remember a time where games did have a high performance that was sustainable.
Definitely most notable in like the PS2 and GameCube era. I forget if Xbox had good 60 FPS or not. There we go.
It was, I don't remember how common it might have been, but yes, it did had that. Anyway, what I'm basically doing is just a bit of a cleanup, because again, this is an option area which has 2 more Leviathans, meaning that I can just, farm them to actually gain extra bolts, because as you can see, the smuggler, as you can imagine, the smuggler is the kind of type of, person that would love to put his hands on something like Leviathan souls. And yeah, returning also are the skill points, so if you're planning on farming those to get more extra stuff, be forewarned, because the ones in this game are a bit challenging compared to previous ones. It's not on the level of Secret Agent Clank, but it's still a bit of a pain in the ass.
Citizens of Cobalia.
And if I recall correctly, I'm gonna talk to the smuggler now. Yeah, there you go.
Boats in the bank, friend.
Starting with this, you also get these bizarre, multiple question type of mini cutscenes that serves to actually to expand a bit of a lore. And good lord, the bloom effect on Clank.
Oh, that's that PS3.
Can I just say that I never got the appeal of it. Like, I don't even feel like it made video games look more like movies, or at least not like good-looking movies. So
J.J. Abrams movies.
Friend, you're on Cobalia.
And even still, his lens flare arguably at least added something of a cinematic scope. This just looks like an eyesore. Like, I'm curious, did anyone actually legit find the bloom appealing?
No idea.
Mystery. Come here.
Oh well.
I heard he was hatched from an egg frozen somewhere in the verdigris sector like a cragmite sickle, You ought to be careful around him. He's got himself a sore spot for lombaxes.
Okay then.
Of course he does.
Doesn't really sound that Australian to me.
How'd that be?
He's Texas and Australia.
He's a space Australian, Dwibs.
Oh, of course.
So it's like I'm playing those games where where it was supposed to be in a different country, yet everyone sounds American.
Or kind of like something like Dr. Trek, where they're supposed to be in France, but everyone speaks British.
Or the 2016 Hitman.
Although, to his credit, the game never actually did mention him to be Australian, so who knows? Maybe it's just a unique accent meant to simulate the idea of this rugged stranger smuggler.
Alright, tune in for the next part where we see where the smuggler actually takes us. See ya.
See ya.
So, yeah.